The space rig. It went through what seems like countless changes over the years, polluted with various assets all over the place, and you know it will keep on coming. Really? To do a full video on its evolution would have to wait until they stop updating the game. Well, fuck that, I'm doing it now! We're spiraling back in time, into an age where the lobby area wasn't even fully defined yet. We'll be going through what I label as space rig phases. Even though they weren't really space rigs, I'll just call them that for simplicity's sake and because I suck at naming stuff. And I'll start with this one, which I call the Firefly phase. Yeah, a lot of these will have depth textures and some very rudimentary models. At this point they were considering of going for a Firefly vibe, where it's a small ship with 4 dwarves on board just looking for some adventure. That idea does sound pretty neat, but also kinda generic if not done right, at least in my opinion. After that comes the pre-alpha phase. This is the ship which was used for the, well, pre-alpha. It's another spaceship layout that Robert was experimenting with, and I can actually show this one in-game. Really, there's not that much to say besides it's a nice cozy ship overfilled with control panels. Although, for some reason, in my version the cockpit is blocked off by this large wall here. By going into third-person mode and clipping the camera through the wall, we'll still be able to see the pilot's seat actually. Also, there's another wall at the other side of the room blocking a large area here. This large area would have been a drop bay but was sealed off since it was unused. And then on some unnamed pre-alpha build they temporarily ditched a lobby map in favor of a basic menu. But that doesn't mean they weren't working on a lobby. In fact, around this time they released a trailer showcasing a very early exterior appearance of the space rig. This same rig had a cool background made out of it, which is used during the loading screen of some closed alpha builds. The next one is the drill phase. This one by far looks the most unique, with a completely different drop pod in the center. Judging by the appearance around the drop pod, it's really hard to tell if this is a giant spaceship or a base. Likely a ship. And finally, the rig phase. It looks the most familiar out of all of these phases, but still pretty different. As we can see, there's a drop bay at the top left there. This thing, which has to be the mission terminal. Also, I do believe the room at the bottom right is actually a dumb mock-up of the firing range. Those rectangles sticking out seem to be the most primitive targets. And these two barely readable texts actually say briefing terminal and to HAB 15 respectively. To get to this drop pod area, you would apparently have to take an elevator down from HAB 15. Just keep in mind, these were really nothing more than just random smatterings of ideas while Robert was figuring out the lobby's layout. From here on out, I'll be able to showcase everything in-game, well, save for a few Abyss Bar things that'll come up later. With that said, let's get this thing out of the way. While it is a hub area, it's not really a space rig phase since the devs just used this to select weird missions. You can see 4 giant dwarf statues around the area and 2 locked doors for the crew's quarters and the shooting range. Interestingly, the firing range has been planned as early as the pre-alpha. Also, there's this giant hologram of what appears to be an asteroid with a base on it. At one point before settling on Hawkseas, the dwarves would have visited infinite amount of asteroids. They also very briefly toyed with the idea of planting a base on an asteroid, but living in a spaceship is what ultimately stuck to them. I guess if I had to name this phase, I'd call it the Hexagon phase. And yes, we will check out those missions some other day. Now, we start the long journey that is the evolution of our beloved space rig. And this being the earliest proper space rig that I have full access to. Some of you may remember this one from an old blog post I did back in 2017. Also, did you know Space Rig was a placeholder name? Anyway, you'll really have to use your imagination here since it's a beautiful husk of developer textures. I think it's appropriate to start with the crew cabin, simply containing blocky models of a table with a chair, a very cool bed, and some miscellaneous props. Below the crew cabins there is a strange room with terminals and some spheres around. I'll call this the server room. Lastly, we have this large, straightforward room with a mission terminal and a drop pod on standby. There's a peculiar large sphere behind it, and there is a hole below the drop pod with no force field stopping you from trapping yourself. Also, did I mention you can use your equipment here? With the zipline you can get into this... I don't know. Shortly after, the same rig received some changes with the inclusion of ambient sounds. Like now there are terminals for changing class and opening a server browser. The chair was removed, the server room was also removed, and a force field added so you can no longer trap yourself. Next, we are truly coming up to something much more familiar, the early access rig. Here we see the rig go through a major overhaul, and I'd like to establish my naming of some areas really quick. I'll be referring to the bottom floor as the hub area, this zone as the upper floor or upper level, and this zone as the top hangar. Now, where do we start? The crew cabin layout is still pretty much the same to the previous, except that the bed appearance is closer to the final one and the computer models at the side were removed. We have an accessible, albeit unused medbay. Oh yeah, door sounds are here. And this is the hub area, consisting of the earliest barrels, the mission terminal, the drop pod, placeholder terminals, rectangular elevators, the jukebox... Actually, I should stop the thing before the video gets claimed. And the armor station, which despite the missing force field does absolutely nothing. Then we have these windows which would normally allow us to peek into the endless space, but that doesn't exist yet. Up on the upper level, we have a giant random force field. Walking down further, we'll run into 5 hallways, 4 of which are blocked off, serving as teasers for potential future content. Above each hallway we have text, which from left to right read Top Hangar, Shooting Range, Abyss Bar, Mission Control, and Treasure Vault. Moving on to the top hangar, we have some awkwardly carved out elevator rooms, which leads us to the catwalks, allowing us to get a top view of the area. Here we see the secret slope inside the drop pod's thrusters, which makes sure you don't get stuck. And up here we have another hallway which simply loops around to the second floor. The rig at this point is mainly missing atmosphere and a ton of detail, with each model just being either plain gray, plain yellow, or just dev textures. Now let's slap on some atmosphere on this ship. Yeah. That's more like it. The rig went through a large lighting overhaul and received a lot more detail. Crew cabin was fleshed out of colors, brand new terminals, blinking light, particles, and the like. The medbay remains pretty much untouched, but in the hub area, the barrels now resemble barrels. We got the earliest PSA monitors. Jukebox makes your dwarf slightly headbang. The armor station is sealed off with a force field, and of course, most of this area was polluted with detail. Upstairs, we received only a few changes. The drop pod now emits a blindingly bright light, and elevator rooms aren't carved out as awkwardly. In the following update, more lighting adjustments were made, making the rig appear moodier. Also, I can't disable the HUD. In the hub area, the barrels were made gray and can be kicked. They also emit a unique rolling sound effect, which I swear isn't in the game anymore. PSA monitors appear more familiar now. Various mules were added near the glass without any collision, and a bare minimum space has been made where the Hoxie's model was housed. Other than that, the top hangar's tunnel got a mysterious green light. Going into the tunnel, you will discover Rob's first secret. Since the gravity recalibration button doesn't exist yet, you'd need to work with other dwarves to get up here, or just use a camera hack like me. In the next build, there were a few changes made to the rig's appearance. For starters, 2 terminals for character customization have been added called Change Looks and Crafting Station. The camera goes into third-person mode when dancing, the lighting got a bit brighter again, and there's this green fog everywhere. When looking out the window, you get this nice, ominous look of old Hoxies, which I definitely didn't turn into a background. Here, we see that the lighting received some way more noticeable adjustments, overall brightening up the rig. In the hub, the medbay was made inaccessible. Barrel textures have changed, mules actually have collision, armor station text was removed, launch tutorial terminal was added, and the upgrade terminal was added while the crafting station was moved right next to it. At the upper level, the treasure vault was changed to a memorial hall, which at this point contains a bunch of grey colored statues striking various poses, and a lengthy glass hallway leading to a screen which displays a list of a bunch of closed alpha testers. Also, those 2 giant pickaxes have no collision. There's also the green barrel up here, and let me just say they had some crazy secret ideas for this thing, to the point where it's just way too much effort to execute than it's worth. Lastly, in the top hangar, Robert's secret doesn't loop around back into the upper floor anymore, and we've got a floating pipe. In the next build, there were some changes made to the rig. Like in the upper floor, the apparent random force field was filled up with some models, and the area fleshed out with a few extra details. Mission Control now reacts to more stuff like kicking barrels or dancing. Some functionality was added to the memorial hall so that the statues would only appear when achieving specific ranks or levels, and the glass hallway is no longer a hallway. With that, we are approaching the first early access release of Deep Rock Galactic. Between this and the previous build, the rig didn't go through many changes really. They mainly added some extra lamps here and there. At this point, there will be bare minimum changes made to the rig until way later, since the developers were mainly focusing on other content. On Update 8, the PSA screens received a proper monitor model. The mission terminal model got a small upgrade. The railing received a secondary color and the medbay text was switched out in favor of a logo. On update 11, the rig's top hanger received some visual changes and the gravity recalibration button was added. On update 12, they introduced the mineral terminal. I can finally turn off the HUD again. On update 14, the KPI monitor was added to each crew cabin. The shadows were made brighter, and voice lines were added for when activating the gravity recalibration. On update 15, they replaced the former armor station with an Abyss bar teaser. And as you probably have guessed, I took the camera through those boards to get a better look at the early Abyss bar. This iteration of the bar would have seemingly been much roomier, housing a bunch of tables and chairs. Funnily, the original Abyss bar teaser in the upper floor is still there. Since we are now approaching the Abyss bar's release, it's a great time to acknowledge its own personal evolution. Here is what's likely the earliest iteration of the bar that would have probably still taken place at the upper floor. There's not much I can describe here besides pointing at the bar's entrance, I guess. This next one is a nice cozy bar where you would get a great internal view of the space rig. There would have been Boscos flying around within the bar carrying crates and other stuff. However, it felt too disconnected from the rig and the developer settled for a more cramped bar bringing the players together. Also, reaching this bar would have required much more walking. So they instead decided to carve out a swift bar into the hub area's corner, although the iteration we see here is much roomier than what we received in the end. I can show off a version of this bar in game. Yep, just as big and open as it seemed. Keep in mind that this map is running on update 25, so the appearance of some props isn't accurate to what they actually looked like during the map's development. There are a few notable details like this roof thing, these placeholder rectangular meshes everywhere, and I swear this hoop game is more annoying here. Wait, no, wrong clip, no! And finally, the Abyss bar releases alongside the game's first seasonal event, Oktoberfest. This new area is bathed in various colored lights and props. It now houses the jukebox, a new barrel minigame, and naturally, the ability to order booze. If you want more information about the functionality of this bar, check out Classified number 7. Also, the Hoxie's planet became more detailed. These pillars are now models instead of blocks. 2 large fangs were put on both sides of the window and 2 orange lamps were placed in between the windows. The upper floor's decorations have changed quite a bit due to the bar's introduction. There is now a giant rusty pipe coming from beneath. At the top hanger we can see the original Robert's secret has been sealed off and a new one was hidden elsewhere. The new secret is now hidden in the ceiling of this room. Reaching it will require gravity recalibration and a well-timed jump. Then we have to get past this tiny obstacle course and we've reached the end of the tunnel. However, if we were to fall down one of these holes, we'll see this strange thick dark fog blocking half of our view, and eventually find a way out of there. Next was update 18.5, which marked the first Halloween event where the space rig received some seasonal decorations temporarily. In the hub area, all the lamp colors were changed to purple, except for this one which is white. Some decorational Halloween lights were hung up on the ceiling. Some banners in the Abyss bar were replaced with the Halloween ones, and the various sized pumpkins were placed around the rig. While unrelated to the video's topic, it's worth mentioning that these events usually come with some cosmetics and minor additions to the caves themselves. On update 19, the Hoxie's model changed to a smooth green planet, and the sun is now shining much brighter. Also, the Abyss bar now has a Today Special. On update 20, we received the first Christmas event, in-universe referred to as Yuletide, which also introduced some seasonal decorations. A ton of various shape, size, and color presents were added throughout the hub area, as well as outside the window. Christmas ornaments were added, which also have an assortment of their own. Whenever broken, Mission Control has a chance to react with a specific voice line.
How old are you? You're behaving like ill-mannered children. Please, stop it.
These decorations are also randomized each time the map is loaded in. On top of that, the banners were styled after Yuletide. Lloyd is now wearing a Santa hat as fake snow is sprinkled around him, some large candles were placed around the rig, the upper floor included, and the mission terminal is wearing a giant Santa hat. The drone modification terminal was introduced under a different name, and the medbay is finally accessible once more since the interior was overhauled. This is where dwarves spawn when they don't make it to the drop pod at the end of the mission, and there's a bunch of drones and machines which purposes cannot be explained without speculation. On update 21, the details of the window were improved. This painful grate clipping was fixed, as well as receiving a second color, and the monitors in the medbay now displaying capacitation stats. On update 22, the game celebrates its first early access anniversary, and their space rig once again gets its temporary decorations. In the hub area, it's raining confetti at the Abyss bar, there's a spinning and color-changing light source attached to the pipes, there are orange and green unexplainable stains on the floor, hopefully not puke, there are party strings hanging around the bar, tiny flags with DRG Year 1 printed on them, a large banner by the window celebrating 1 year in orbit, the Abyss bar logo greatly freshened up, free kickable beer half-off signs placed around the hub, barrel model was improved, and the drone modification terminal now has a few different colored Boscos lying around it. On update 24, the Hoxie's planet appearance has changed once more into a much more detailed model which can be seen from various angles during biome-specific loading screens. It's also been drowned in green colored space along with a bunch of rocks and possibly stones around it. Before I completely forget to acknowledge the doors, they received a nice opening animation in a brand new model. Now, during the development of Update 25, we had a small corner carved out in the rig so it can now neatly house new Forge and Deep Dive terminals. As you can see, their visual appearances are pretty early in this build. Not to mention the Forge's UI at this point is an eye-shattering lava texture. Also, elevators were replaced by a brand new model which emits a placeholder sound. The window corners, slits? I don't know what you call these, but their visuals were improved. Some extra screens were added as part of the Miners Union introduction. There's 2 eerily tiny barrels right outside the window. The asteroids seen through the window have been frozen in place due to a strange bug I was unable to reproduce. And Employee of the Month screen was added. Guess this Lone Ranger guy is a permanent cameo in this video. Later on, the Forge's model gets finished and the Deep Dive terminal I guess just turned orange. Oh, and we're on the second Halloween event. Besides the same old banner, the pumpkin spawn locations have changed. There's a huge pumpkin with a face carved out behind Lloyd. Candles emitting purple light were put in instead of a lamp color change. There's now a yellow kickable box, and the planet hologram is now translucent and has no collision. The thing is about the hologram is you could originally trap yourself behind it since it had collision. On update 26, they added a kickable hammer which doesn't stub the dwarven toe. Getting the hammer through the barrel minigame's hoop will produce the following result. On update 27, the second Yuletide event has arrived, temporarily filling up the rig with seasonal appropriate decorations. The festivities are quite literally reused from previous year, only putting in a few extra candles in place. And I don't even know if those candles are new. And the next update is when the space rig starts going through one more big overhaul, and the rig will look a bit familiar even to those who started playing after the game's 1.0 launch. Yeah, this one's widely unfinished. Where should I even start? Maybe with the fact that the Deep Dive terminal was gonna be locked away behind a red force field? Or that these pipes behind the equipment and drone terminals are just rotated forges? Oh, and this giant gap in the wall where the window originally resided. How could I miss that? And the mission terminal's appearance has also completely changed, and the other terminals are scattered around with extremely early models attached to them. By looking up some terminal concept art from a while ago, we can conclude their appearance will soon greatly improve. The Abyss bar is changing once more. There's a brand new tunnel underneath the bar, floating mules and grates, obviously artifacts of early development, random carved out crater next to the drop pod hole. There was this pipe added inside the floor which would be covered up by grates. There's this large placeholder panel for tutorial and assignment terminals, and walls have been intensely molded around the elevator here. The upper level has just as equally undergone a ton of changes. The hallway over here has been changed into a blue tunnel, Rob's secret is gone, the 4 tunnels teasing a shooting range and the like are gone with only the Memorial Hall entrance remaining, albeit positioned differently, a gorgeous new tunnel leading to the top hangar, and... there's just so much happening here, I don't know how to describe it. There's all these... oh look! Yellow flannels! 8 out of 10. You probably want me to jump out this giant gap before we move on. Well, I regret to inform you, but space does indeed have gravity, and just teleports you slightly into the future. The future really does look bright, huh? You guessed it, yet another lightning adjustment. Here we see some terminals were positioned in a way it would make more sense, but a few of them are now floating, and the blue mule is right next to the forge. And there's some gigantic pipes. Did I say and enough? The strange new drop was filled up with some unexplainable machinery and a catwalk placed above it. A few more forges were placed behind these 2 terminals just for good measure. The jukebox is at the other side. I guess the dance zone was carved out. Bar itself moved out into the open a little bit. Wait, the bar is reversed. And brand new windows are slowly being put in. In the upper floor we have more flannels, a new carved out walkway, and gravity recalibration received its own panel, which is placed on a giant machine that we can only assume is responsible for generating artificial gravity throughout the ship. Let's jump out the window hole again for the time skip. Alright, the lighting seems fixed. Never mind. So, we all know this layout. The forge has been moved down here next to the bar. Deep Dive's terminal is right next to the large windows. The abyss bar has been filled up with crates. Jukebox returned to the other side. Pickaxe customization is right next to the elevator. Equipment and drone terminals have learned how to hide the forge models better. There's the early assignment board model. Asteroids are moving again and some other model upgrades. In the upper floor, some walls in this walkway were painted blue. The blue tunnel now has a turn. There's depth textures around the Memorial Hall's doors for some reason. And lastly, both the Memorial Hall and top hangar remain pretty much untouched. How are we gonna progress in the future now that the window's actually here? Yeah, don't ask. The lighting is actually fixed this time. Here we have the 2nd year anniversary event. The abyss bar has pretty much the same decorations, but less actually. The flags were changed to pink and now have DRG Year 2 printed on them. Party strings are now yellow instead of red, and we have confetti on the ground without the confetti rain. Other than that, we have the finished assignment board model, a grand and detailed deep dive computer, and this decorational console in the upper floor. No more dump jumping into space transitions. Next up, we have a floating minigun attached to 2 poles, many stretched out tables which are acting as shelves. There's still forge models behind the shelves though. There are these interesting diver's helmets with lamps inside them. Draw pod model upgrade and a slappable dwarf figure added to the bar. In the upper floor hold up. The draw pod is missing a proper thruster and has a secret mule hole exposed. Memorial Hall's hallway received this thing in the back, and the closed alpha credits moved in a much more secluded area, and in its original place there is now a promotion terminal. Update 29's release introduced a brand new exterior space rig design. Up until now it looked like a bootleg bar cube from the outside. Albeit the lighting on the model is terrible. The lighting does get better during the tutorial's loading screen though. The accessory shop and mineral trade also have brand new models in their place. Mission terminal appearance received an upgrade. Equipment terminal now features a small workshop presumably used by dwarves for modifying or repairing weapons and robots. Some wall panels added behind the pickaxe customization. Chinese food takeout in space. Some miscellaneous details on the deep dive computer. This elevator now leads you directly to the Memorial Hall instead of the upper floor. The 4 crew cabins were filled to the brim with stuff. It seems like the cabins were themed after each class. In the upper floor we have this large hatch next to the Memorial Hall door. Memorial Hall's ground texture was changed to a reflective gray. Seems like they did some wall stuff up here in the Memorial. The Memorial Hall received some cosmetic improvements around the promotion terminal. A brand new tunnel added in the Memorial Hall leading to the upper floor. And in the upper floor's blue tunnel we have this unexplainable pipe. Before anyone says that I completely forgot about the med bay, I didn't. There haven't been any changes made down there. We are now on Update 30, the 1.0 release of Deep Rock Galactic. This is the rig most are acquainted with. The top hangar finally got a much needed visual boost. I find it funny how despite all these giant hatches around the hangar, the hatch for the original Rob's Secret is still here to this day. There were also shelves behind pickaxe customization for showcasing various possible pickaxes, and there were many generic props added around the rig. Lastly, Update 31. First update after the game's 1.0 launch. Here the rig got brand new wardrobes, some yellow thingies installed by the window, very strange spinning machinery. Memorial Hall now has light strips around the walls and floor. This sci-fi thing I swear I know the name of but cannot remember for the life of me. Highly buffed up crane model for holding the pod, fridge, and various other details. Well, that's about it. We finally got to the current end at least. We went through a ton of changes and there's countless more details I didn't mention that you can very likely spot out in this video itself. The journey literally and metaphorically has been really long for the rig, but it seems like it's finally reaching for its prime. Honestly, it's pretty much at its prime already. Special thanks to the game's art director Robert for sharing some information on the rig's deep past. And from here, we can only speculate how much more the rig will change on future updates. Speaking of updates, what if I told you the devs put something revolutionary into the game and nobody noticed? By walking up to the KPI monitor, you can scroll through the tabs without accessing the terminal itself! Holy shit. What the hell? Are you sure we aren't on Unreal 5 right now?